Hi, folks. Welcome back for another episode of PT Outcast. I'm here with Eric, and we wanted to share with you a really fun journey that we went on talking about all things abundance and scarcity in physical therapy education. We had the extreme privilege to have Kendra Gagnon and Mary Blackinton on to talk about the new paper that they have in the Journal of Physical Therapy Education called Beyond Scarcity, Reimagining an Abundant Future for Physical Therapist Education. And I will tell you, first of all, the paper had blown my socks off a little bit, and I might feel like my jaw just kept dropping every time we were talking with them throughout the course of this episode.
Yeah, I think this is one of the more important position papers, maybe ever. Especially considering some of the, financial stuff going on. And, a couple episodes, Kendra was on and talking about the Grad Plus loans and that challenge. And this conversation really connected to that one,
Yeah.
because I think it talks about like, how is there going to be enough resources for everybody? And, their paper calls out like this scarcity model that education is built off of. And so this is dissecting that like lens of scarcity versus abundance in PT. And yeah, the same thing. As we're going through this, I was just like, okay, yeah, like it was good exercise for the brain.
Yeah, I kept saying my brain feels like it's broken because something that I'd thought of as fact for so long, like, oh, small class size, that's associated with prestige and it's what you strive for. But actually, that's scarcity in practice. And that moment, just like my mind was totally blown, and now I can't unsee it. I keep seeing these things now. So there were just moments like that throughout the entire episode.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really genuine reflection because that's how it looked when we were talking. Like you were just like, what?
I just
So
think I need to lie down. This is like too
yeah,
much.
yeah,
But it's good. That's the type of um, strong position, like you said, and the thinking that is really what starts change, right? And so I really loved hearing about both Kendra and Mary had ideas and they present them in their paper, and we talked about them. Okay, if we're seeing scarcity, we're seeing some problems within the physical therapy profession and our approach to education. But here are some tangible ways that you might think about addressing those. And I always love when people come with solutions too. So I think that it's not just one of those, oh, here's the issue. It's like, and also, here's
yeah.
something for you on a silver platter. Here's some ideas. Let's get started.
Yeah, and they talk about some other conversations they're continuing, and I think the ideas that they're presenting are urgent for us, and so you used a good word at the start of this. It was honor to have them and to have this conversation, and I hope that this is part of a bunch of conversations that build a wave of momentum that can get us moving in the right way, so that our future is something that is healthy and robust
And abundant, right?
and abundant. Yeah.
Abundant. Yeah. That's my new favorite word. Well, yeah, we really thoroughly enjoyed it. We hope you do too.
All right, everybody, enjoy the episode. Catch you later. Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of PT Outcast. Carly and I are here today with Kendra Gagnon and Mary Blackinton, and they are the authors of a recent position paper published in JOPTE. And the position paper is about this issue of scarcity versus abundance. And so the position paper was entitled Beyond Scarcity, Reimagining an Abundant Future for Physical Therapist Education, which seems to be a really timely discussion. As everybody might know, Kendra was on a couple episodes ago, and she talked about the Grad Plus loan challenge that's facing the profession and limited resources that we might have going into our future. And so, this is sort of a follow-up to that and an expansion of that in a much bigger lens. And I have to say, every once in a while, there's a position paper, an opinion paper that comes around that just like really rings your bell. And I think this is one of those. And so first off, just congrats for getting behind it and writing this and finding a place to put it out there into the world. I really appreciate the effort that it took. So congrats to both of you. And before we get going into the paper and learning a little bit about it, I'm just going to kind of throw it to you to just kind of share with the audience, like what you're working on now and a little bit about your position. So Mary, do you want to start out?
Sure. My current position is entitled Director of In Tandem DPT, which is a component of Rehab Essentials. And in that particular um, role, my goal is I coordinate with universities that we partner with in providing educational materials, but also providing faculty coaching, working with the director, et cetera. So it's a really exciting opportunity for me to do what I love most, and that is mentor and collaborate with others. My prior life, prior to that, as I was at Nova Southeastern University for many years, the last 10 of which I started the first officially titled hybrid program, which was a decelerated 4-year program designed to work to meet the needs of working and non-traditional students.
Yeah, that's great. And, let's just take a moment here. We talk about hybrid education a lot in this platform. There's like hybrid OG royalty here. So, bravo.
Mary is the OG.
Yeah, right.
For
So,
sure.
Great. Kendra, share with everybody what you're working on. Yeah.
Sure thing. Yeah, my name's Kendra Gagnon. I am a academic physical therapist. In my current role, I am an associate professor and the director of rehabilitation science education in the Department of Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation in the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. I have over 2 decades of experience in health professions education, primarily in DPT education. Have been in a number of institutions. Of course, stands on the shoulders of Mary and others, and being part of Baylor's hybrid DPT program. I was a founding faculty and was the director and chair there, where we built a hybrid program that was actually accelerated to 2 years. So sort of leveraged that hybrid modality for others in other ways. And now in my role at Hopkins, I'm still in education, but mostly in the post-professional space, providing academic support and leadership in our residency and fellowship programs, and also working on some post-professional education projects in strategy in our department.
Okay, great. Yeah. So doing some great things, and let's get into the paper, which, talk to me about the genesis of this. Where did it come from? And I guess Kendra will start. Is this a Kendra question? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. So I want to start by referencing Michael Smith from Carnegie Mellon and the book he wrote, The Abundant University. And so when you ask about the genesis, what I think about is I think the book came out in 2023. That's when I read it. I think it was fairly new. And basically what he lays out in the book is, higher education, our higher education system is built, basically in an industrial model that, students are the raw materials that are processed through instruction into this product, a credential. And that the higher education system was really built to perpetuate scarcities in each of these 3 areas. So scarcity of students, scarcity of instruction, scarcity of credentials. And it's created a higher education environment where we limit seats, where we have really small classrooms where instructors are, recreating the wheel over and over again. There's lots of duplication of effort. And in order to get this credential that is very rare and difficult. And so really when I read that book, Eric, you talked about it, and that was such a generous introduction, I want to say, about the position paper. I also want to say I'm really proud of it. It was so much fun to write with Mary. But like you said, with that position paper, that like sometimes something real, I think you said, rings your bell. This book like rung my bell. Like I couldn't stop seeing scarcity ever. As soon as it's like I couldn't unsee it. And so really from there, I started thinking a lot about, okay, how is this playing out in physical therapy education, and what are the implications? And we can of course get into all of that. And that's really what the paper is. Mary, of course, is such a wonderful mentor, colleague, friend, thought partner. And so started talking to her about this, and she read the book, and I don't want to tell her story, but I think, we just sort of started to really sort of vibe in this conversation, and then kind of went like, what if we wrote about it? What if we published this? What if we we don't hear anyone else having this kind of conversation? So why not like maybe we should get it out there. And so I think that's kind of, where it started.
Yeah. And just to add on to that, so yes, Kendra said, I've read this book called The Abundant University. It's by Michael Smith. You've got to read it. Like before the end of our conversation, I had ordered it, it was being delivered to seriously, it was being delivered to my house. And once I read it, I'll make the analogy. If you ever started thinking about a certain type of vehicle, maybe a VW Bug or something, once you start thinking about that, everywhere you go, you see, all of a sudden, you see those cars. And that's what Michael Smith's book did for us. He put a perspective, really a lens or a way of looking at not just higher education, but in particular, physical therapist education, that we couldn't, not only could not unsee it, we couldn't stop thinking about it and saying, oh my gosh, we're part of this system that is focusing on exclusivity. And one of the things about his book, we would encourage everyone to read it. But one of the things that really resonated with me is he gave the example and the parallels to the music and entertainment industry. That at one time, we were all going to movies only, listening to records or tapes or CDs, whatever it was at the time. And, fast forward over 10 years with digital expansion and the way music was created and disseminated, YouTube channels, all those kind of things, it completely changed the industry. And those organizations that said, no, it will never change. There will always be MGM, and this is the way people are going to consume media. And that was just really powerful to me, because I did think about 15 years ago, what did I watch? Where did I watch it, et cetera. And we feel, and we do feel and felt very powerfully that we have to get this out to people. This needs to change for many, many reasons. And we should look at that industry as a model of it. It can change and survive, but it kind of needs a bit of an explosion.
And I would say the same thing happened to me when I read your paper. I was like, ooh, now I am thinking about this and I can't unsee this. And now I also need to read this book because I'm like, I want to have that moment too. But I feel like after reading, I was like, I think my mouth's open. I need to close my mouth like this. I'm just like, oh my goodness, I hadn't thought about these concepts before. So can you take us through a little bit? Because everyone should read your paper, but if they haven't yet, what were maybe some of the scarcities? Because I think that for me, like even I hadn't really fully considered those until after reading the paper, and then, like you said, you can't unsee them.
Yeah, I think again, it's the framework that Smith lays out: scarcity of students, scarcity and instruction, scarcity of credentials. So what do we mean by that? Well, I think scarcity of students, we have pretty rigid class size caps. We all have a cohort size, and our accreditation requirements make it so that we cannot really grow. We have, we have limited numbers of new programs that can be approved. So both within programs and across programs, we have limited numbers of new programs that can be approved. We have rigid admissions criteria, and we talk a lot about, uh, proliferation of programs of being a bad thing. So we even talk about expansion or growth as a bad thing in terms of adding more seats for students. So we tend to perpetuate that scarcity of students. Scarcity of instruction, I think that the CAPTE 50% rule is a perfect example of that, where we have added, higher qualifications for faculty. So we sort of limit who can be a faculty. And we also limit, our models of instructional delivery are pretty labor intensive. We're limited to, we're going to all teach this course. It's going to be very bespoke. It's built piece by piece on site, right? We all build our own course. So we sort of have this labor intensive model. And then scarcity of credentials, there's one path to be a physical therapist, and it is the DPT, and it is a bachelor's degree plus 3 years. And we haven't really done any meaningful, even bridging from PTA or, it really, there aren't any on and or off ramps. And so, so I think those are some of the scarcities that we sort of laid out with a lot of, sort of examples and references to those, and how they sort of show up in the discourse when we talk about quality and faculty qualifications and proliferation of programs and, the types of discourse that we have.
Yeah. And I think I would like to also add that we really learned a lot from Andy Hogan's work, who has written kind of from a sociological framework of the profession. And, going back to the start of our profession, the founding, I won't say fathers, but kind of the founding mothers looked at medical education and said, in order for us to have that same level of esteem, we need to be exclusive. And it was built in. So they added physics and chemistry and things that, we could argue about that for days, but whether chemistry is really necessary to be a really good, effective physical therapist. And by doing that, it added the hurdle became higher. And to what Kendra said, exclusivity is the other word for quality. So your quality if you're exclusive. And in fact, one thing I learned from Michael Smith's book was that, and I didn't know this, that your ranking in US World and News reports is based in part of how many people you reject. That to me is the ultimate scarcity model, right? Oh, a high five, we rejected 500 people. No, we rejected 1,000. So those are the kind of things I think that it's not just the culture of the profession, is also sociologically what has happened. You add to that then we went from bachelor's, which I started with, to master's, to entry-level DPT. Now, if you think of this as a hurdle, it's become exceptionally high. And we didn't talk a lot about cost, but that's something that maybe if we have time later, we could talk about that, because it is related.
And I mean, so that's the good news, right? Like, I mean, the good news and the bad news, but we built it. So I think sometimes we sort of assume that these scarcities are like natural and inevitable. It's just what it is. It's just, you just have to reject students. You can only do it this way. But I think when you put sort of Smith and Hogan's work side by side, you realize we built it this way on purpose in service of quality. But what we really have done is created an environment where PT education is a luxury product. But the good news is we can unbuild it then. We can build it a different way.
We can unbuild it. I like that.
Yeah.
So, I think let's talk about it. It took, 9 minutes and 40 seconds for the accreditation word to come up. And so I was waiting for it. And, I think there's some things that really are challenged in terms of how we structure the accreditation model that we are, kind of have to follow. This 50% rule is one that really, really kind of gets me. Do you have any perspective, like where that came from? Like, what were the drivers that said, yeah, this is a good idea? What were we trying to achieve, Mary?
Yeah, I started teaching in 1994. Don't tell me how old you were at that time, because I'm going to freak out. And at that time, there was not a 50% rule. It was expected that the people teaching had a degree higher than the people entering. So because I started teaching right at the time master's came, and I had a master's, my program director said, you really need to move on and get your doctorate. So historically, it hasn't always been there. And that's really, really important to understand. Also, we weren't historically always a DPT. There were certificate programs, if you remember. But I think the main reason is that as a profession, it is our obligation ethically to increase the body of knowledge and the science upon which our work as physical therapists is done. But there was an assumption, and I couldn't tell you who started it or how it came to be. But the assumption was, if you have people with terminal degrees, then you're going to build this big body of researchers, and therefore we will build the science for our profession. And there have been articles since then that have said, oh, that hasn't quite worked, right? Because you've got lots of people with terminal degrees that are not engaging in research. And we point out in the paper the medical model. Physicians do not have to get a terminal degree to teach. And so, we model and we put in such high esteem medical education. And yet I think we have to really ask ourselves, why did we take some things, this exclusivity piece, and not follow their model in who's eligible to teach. And slightly related to that, I would say, is this idea that when Kendra described we have one pathway, why aren't we having more pathways like clinician researchers, clinician health science researchers? I mean, there's so many directions that as a profession, we are not boxed into this. It was a choice made by some person some time ago. And I agree with Kendra. We can absolutely unbuild that rule and that policy.
And I think this is an important place that I just want to like call out, or like separating intent from impact, right?
Yeah.
I don't think that Mary or I mean, either in the paper or in our, our conversations or in our hearts, have any belief that there was any intent. I think putting the 50% rule, Mary, I think you said it beautifully, was really like authentically about like, we are now advancing the credential. We want to make sure we are contributing, that we are like, I think a lot of these things, moving to the doctor of physical therapy, a lot of that was a part of Vision 2020 and this really bold vision for autonomous practice. I think there is some really, I think CAPT's role is important. And the people there are doing hard and fine work on making sure that we are protecting our students and the public, right? So but the impact has been, and this is what I think Hogan points out too, is exclusion. And I think that's been a downstream impact that maybe nobody really intended. And so I think that's the point here too, is that I think we're trying to really focus on impact, but also thinking about that all of these things can be true at the same time. We could still feel really passionately about the high bar we want to set for faculty, but we could also create a system where more people can reach that bar. Instead of just deciding the one thing that's measurable is I can measure whether you have a PhD or not. So easy, check. Maybe there are other ways that we can build the system so that, again, we're not lowering the bar. The bar's still there, but we're just building a system where more people can reach it, because we know there are certainly people that contribute to scholarship and the profession and knowledge in a lot of ways, that may or may not include a PhD, which I happen to have and value a lot. But I also see there's a lot of other ways.
Yeah, as somebody without a PhD, I feel that exclusion in academia all the time, right? Like opportunities that are available, like, privileges afforded that way that aren't afforded the other way. But, if you put scholarly output alongside another one, that, what does it matter? And the thing that always is funny to me is that you could have this 50% with a terminal degree and 50% without in the one faculty, but their expectations for merit and for performance review are identical. Right. So you still have to do the same work.
Yeah. Yes.
So it's like, okay. All right. So, yeah. So, I guess this gets to, there's other things about, you mentioned admissions and what qualifies as a prerequisite. How do we start to like, what's the functionality to like have that conversation and tackle one of these accreditation issues and move it more towards abundance?
Well, I'll start, Kendra, but
yeah,
go ahead.
I think
we both had like a big sigh. Like,
yes, yeah.
Well, all right, let's start unbuilding. Here we go.
All right, this is another like 45-minute answer. But I would say I'm going to make the analogy, which I'm big into, to this problem and the problem of falls in older adults. It is multifactorial. There is not one reason that seniors fall. There are many, many reasons. And the more that are layered on, the higher the chance they fall. And likewise, so if we look at this in a similar manner, this scarcity approach is multifactorial. And unfortunately, it impacts historically marginalized individuals, including minorities, but also socioeconomically disadvantaged individuals, regardless of their ethnicity, are now marginalized because of this huge step that you have to take. So I think the only way, and this is my opinion, and I'm not sure, I'm interested, Kendra, to hear what you'll say, but in my opinion, we cannot do one thing. There is no one thing. There are many things. is looking at the 50% rule. It's changing the pathway into PT programs, reconsidering, do you need a baccalaureate degree, quite honestly, to go into the DPT, looking at pathways between PTAs and PTs, looking at time variable instruction so that the student, and I was one of those students. I was very poor. I worked at least 3 jobs throughout my prep work and then PT school. And that was so that I could eat, right? It wasn't so I didn't have fancy cars or anything. So we need to reduce the barriers that are really linked to affordability. And as you all know, there is a new cap on Grad Plus loans are now in the history, right, of our country. So for so many reasons, I don't think we can change our profession without also having this conversation as part of the higher education landscape, because costs have to go down. Now, we have to be responsible for some of that, right? I don't think we need faculty models where there's one faculty for every 10 students, quite honestly. That's expensive. What's the biggest number on every budget for every program? Faculty costs and benefits. So again, not to smatter a whole bunch of things on the wall, but in my opinion, the more things that we could approach at the same time, and it might be with different groups, right? We might be with the higher education community, with ACAPT and CAPD, with APTA, with PTA programs. So that I think is the only, almost like a revolution instead of evolution. Go ahead, Kendra.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with all of it. I think, when I think about what we've talked about and, even the paper, we wrote, I mean, we have this, abundance graphic, right? And so it's got abundance in the center. And so we sort of are thinking about mapping to the different scarcities, and so instead of scarcity of students where it's small class sizes, rigid admissions, locking it down, how do we expand student access? Instead of scarcity of instruction, how do we enhance and scale instruction? And Mary, you kind of hinted at this as well. Like, do we, in a world where we have online learning and AI and all of these tools, do we really need one faculty for every student anymore? I don't know. Like, are we even asking the question though? Or are we just assuming that's how we've always done it? Diversifying credentialing. So again, have on ramps, off ramps, laddering, bridges, exploring time variable options. But I think they all sort of ladder up to this idea of abundance, right? Which really is in my mind, it's the idea of, and again, I'm also borrowing from sort of Ezra Klein's work and his book Abundance and the Abundance Agenda. So that's another book that I found really interesting in thinking about it, for kind of societally and globally. But it's unlocking supply, right? And when I say a supply, it's supply of seats in DPT programs. What we haven't talked about yet is the fact that we also aren't producing enough PTs. So at the very same time that in academia that we are rejecting, it depends. I mean, applicants are softening, but we still are rejecting, at least a third, maybe half of all the qualified applicants that come in. We're leaving thousands of applicants out of PT education at the same time we're talking about a shortage, a crisis, right? And so I think when we think about, what an abundance perspective might do, and all of these kinds of things might do, if we can come up with both local strategies and system changes that can unlock supply, expand the number of people who can be a PT. We can not only meet societal need, but we may be able to put some downward pressure on costs. Now, higher ed isn't a pure market, but Mary signaled at this as well. Supply and demand, though, is pretty simple. You increase supply, you drive demand, there's increased competition, cost goes down. And I'll just say one more thing, and that gets at another piece of why we might continue to perpetuate this scarcity. And that's because if PT education and higher education is a luxury product, it's expensive. We can charge a lot for it. And it gets really complicated, I think, of dismantling systems that are built by us for us and are working well for some of us. But ultimately, I think, what can we be doing locally, but as well as a profession and with our systems and structures, including our accreditor, to, again, unlock supply to, what if everyone who wanted to be a PT could be one? Like,
Yeah.
what might that look like?
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen this article, but I'm sorry. Go ahead, Carly.
Oh no, I was gonna say this is breaking my brain in the best way. It's like it's helping me think through some of these concepts of, what was marketed and what is marketed to students, right? Small class size. You want like 10-to-1 faculty ratio, and you want to be part of this power. And I went to a program because I was like, oh, it has a small class size. And that was like something that was, kind of touted as like, this is how education should be done. But like, why can't there be an abundance of excellence? Why can't we all be excellent? And there are a lot of us. I think that especially with, and I want to come back to this shortage that we're having. My prediction here on this podcast, I think it's going to get even worse with the caps right now, because when I looked into the limit of $100,000 per lifetime to become a physical therapist without securing private loans, which is a whole separate thing. If you look at the range of program costs, like there are some programs that maybe that would cover, but like the vast majority, not a chance. Not even going to touch a year of admission at some of the upper echelons of tuition. So it's just like, I think we need to make moves in this direction on the sooner side, just thinking about what else is going on federally.
Carly, I don't know if you saw this, and all of you, but there was just recently a research report published in JOPD called Career Regret Related to Educational Debt Within the Physical Therapy Profession. And they compared physical therapist education and PTA. And I just encourage everybody to read it, because it is unbelievable, the percentage. 41% of physical therapists, they interviewed people 0 to 10 years out. 41% regret. And that regret is related to student loan debt. The other thing is, in the New York Times, there was a guest essay by a gentleman, Ezekiel Emanuel, and some of his colleagues from University of Pennsylvania. And I just have to read this. This is his perspective, but he was talking about the impact of this new big, beautiful bill. Affluent students will manage, while lower income students will think twice about going to medical school, insert PT school there, if not forgo it altogether. Fewer students will hail from rural areas, and therefore fewer will return to such communities for patients. By selecting for those who can afford to pay, the loan cap may appear to reduce average medical debt, but the physician shortage will worsen, and healthcare access will grow even more unequal. And that it just is he said it exactly, and it's the same is true for PT education.
Yeah. And like I was one of those people, I grew up very low income household in a rural area, and securing my grad plus loans was the only path for me to get to, a graduate school like that. My parents could not have helped support me at all. And so I just felt so targeted by what's happening. And I'm like, ooh, this really triggers me. And I think the other thing to think about is the students that do decide, okay, I will take this on, they will be saddled with a lot of debt. And then if they're going to need to fund it through private loans, they're not going to be eligible for stuff like the program I just participated in, the public service loan forgiveness. Again, that's the only reason I was able to take on so much debt and pay it back. But then if they're not eligible for programs like that, it's just it's chaos right now. I'm stressed out. I'm worried about it. And I'm like, I want to solve it. So if we can solve this.
Thanks for sharing your personal perspective on that too, Carly. And I just want to, I can't miss the opportunity to have this little Easter egg about Carly and I in the podcast. So when I was younger, my dad was a real big fisherman. And so we would take these family vacations to this pond, and we would go to this pond, and we would drive many, many hours from New Jersey to Maine. And we would like drive way up into Maine, get to like the middle of Maine, middle of nowhere in Maine. And then we would turn left and we would drive some more into the most middle of nowhere Maine. And there was this little tiny fish pond there. And that's where we would vacation. Like, and the purpose was to go where there was nobody. And that's where Carly lived.
That's where I lived. Literally, that's like, I'm like, that's where I grew up.
So drive north, take a left.
I was wondering where the story was going. Okay, there we go. That's where
like
Carly
middle
lived.
of
I love
nowhere. Yeah, deep in the
I love
woods.
it.
Yep.
I love it.
Yeah.
And I don't think
Well,
we've mentioned yet also, and I know this is a passion of Kendra's, but there is still a very, very big bias against anything but residential learning. That hybrid and digital learning is less than, that in-person learning is the gold standard. And that's despite the fact that there are many, programs out there, not quite 20% yet. I know Kendra has that data. But that's very sad because there is no evidence that people don't learn in a hybrid format. There is absolutely none in our profession or others. And the perspective essay from Ezekiel Emanuel, he was pushing for 3-year medical school, talking about the accelerated piece, because he said people need to get out and get working and not, you age in medical school and therefore then you have fertility, the females have fertility problems. And there's just this perpetuation because of these decisions that it has to be this long, even though we know learning occurs differently than we did 200 years ago when this all started.
Right. And that's an example. That's another scarcity example of we can, thinking about tools like online learning that can be used to, democratize access and scale and this resistance to that in favor of an in-person model, which is limited to the people who can get there and the seats in the room, in the physical room. Right. So I think that's another, really great example. I do think though, and, I think it's kind of getting back to some of that big, juicy question you asked where we all sighed, Eric. Like, I also don't want to pretend like it's just like I think it can be easy to come across as like abundance, just do more, make more, just do, like it can be a little pie in the sky. I think it is a little. I think that's part of the point is to like really think like, what if we reimagine something so different? But I also think it's possible. And I think sometimes there's a couple things. The uncomfortable thing that we have to do is ask ourselves who benefits from this scarcity model, right? And wonder, and I mean, you even mentioned it, Carly. We only accept 6%. Who likes that? Students. Who also likes it? Alumni. My degree feels really valuable if I know I'm from the most exclusive place, right? So I think we have to think about who benefits and why we may be doubling down on old structures. I also think I don't want us to fall into a trap though of like this illusion of complexity, right? Sometimes it's like, it's too big, it's too much. We can't it's actually not that complex. Like CAPTI is us. Like it's our accreditor, right? We are CAPTI, right? Like the APTA is us. It is our profession. Like these are our colleagues, our friends, people that care about the profession. Like we can sit down at the table and advocate for things. We can create, invest like AAMC has, APTA could invest in, innovation in PTA. We could create a pilot program CAPTI could create a pilot program for programs to grow. There could be incentives. So I think even at this big systems level, I also think that we, in the trenches, it feels difficult. And I do think there are small levers people could pull even internal to their own programs. But I think even from a systems perspective, we can change the discourse. We are CAPTI. These are things we built and we can change. And I think we sometimes we kind of, hide behind or even get overwhelmed by this sort of illusion of complexity. And I think, that's a trap we fall into.
Yeah, I appreciate that. There are some examples of success of abundance in healthcare, right? So nursing is traditionally positioned as a marker of success in that they have a lot of pathways, right? So I think, do you mention that in your paper a little bit? You probably, because I think
Yes.
that comes from the book there too. So,
Yeah.
I guess just, I don't know which one of you would like to do this, but just for the audience here, talk about why nursing is considered a success or a partial success for this abundance model.
Uh, I can take it, Kendra,
Yeah, that'd be
unless you
great.
would
Mhm.
rather.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So nursing has multiple points of entry, right? And one point of entry, so let's say somebody gets an LPN credential, they can shift very quickly into an RN credential. The RN can shift. There are deliberate pathways between LPN, RN, well, there's RN that is not a Bachelor of Science, and there is a BSN. And then there is also some of the ongoing things like a nurse practitioner, nurse anesthetist, right? And the difference between nursing and PT is that you don't have to get 5 more credentials to make that little jog into the next pathway. You go to an LPN to RN program or an RN to BSN program. What we do, in contrast, so let's take the physical therapist assistant, they have to go and get a bachelor's degree and take all the same prerequisites that all of us without that credential of physical therapist assistant had to take. So they have a demonstrated knowledge, understanding of the profession, but yet we insist on doing the same pathway that every other DPT student did. Whereas if we were more like nursing, we would say, let's create a specific pathway for PTAs that doesn't require jumping over every hoop that every other physical therapist student has to do. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that was very well, thank you. And um, I guess it makes me question the prerequisite values, right? Like, we brought up chemistry before specifically, like, okay, so I guess if we look at this with a kind of devil's advocate perspective, I'm going to say, like, well, we're rejecting these people from PT school because they're not qualified. They didn't score well enough on their prerequisites. That's a proxy for their intelligence, our prediction that they therefore cannot complete physical therapy school, and then will present a danger to society for our patients if they're progress through. So what's the answer to that argument, right? Because I feel like that's a really easy argument to make back and be like, oh, we're just trying to protect the public, keep the scarcity, because that we're ensuring we're only getting the very best.
Yeah,
Can
I mean, oh yeah, go ahead,
I
Carly.
say, I just want to share a quick point, and then Kendra, I think, can make it sound nicer. But I just want to share. I failed second semester organic chemistry in college. Failed it. Straight up failed it. You didn't need second semester organic chemistry, but I was top of my class in my PT school program, and and so it's one of those things where it's like, I mean, I did like well enough in the other classes, and the chemistry I needed, but I did, I was an example where like I maybe didn't, and I didn't know how to learn yet, right? I didn't really understand the science of learning and how to learn effectively until I got to grad school and was kind of taught some of those things. So I think that's the thing that maybe we're missing here is maybe a lot of these students are coachable if they learn how to learn effectively, because in, a lot of undergrad programs, you're not really taught that. So that's my take.
And no, and I mean, I don't have a lot to add to that other than just to say, like, they're not qualified based on what, we set, again, I think what I mean, for me at least, like maybe there's somebody out there that can really explain this to me or like really point to the data, but when I sort of peel back the onion, here's this set of prerequisites. Okay. 3.0 GPA minimum. Okay. But we reject a ton of students that have that, right? Take the GRE, don't take the, we're all in all this debate, take the GRE, don't take the GRE. It's not really mapped to our profession, but even to the extent that you feel like it may be a useful measure of, somebody's academic abilities and preparation and whether they take a test, how do we decide what is the score? And what works, so I think, again, I think some of these things are a little bit arbitrary. I think we've, I have been to probably dozens of sessions and read at least as many papers on predictors of NPT outcomes, right? And tell me what we know about that. Like, very, very little. And also, again, and it's also like NPTE is incredibly important. It's an easy to measure outcome, but like, what else? Like, does a patient care? If you failed second semester of PT school, or if it took you 2 times to pass the licensure exam, like they probably mostly care if you exist in their zip code at all.
Right.
Like if there is
Yeah.
somebody you can see at all. So I don't know. I don't know but I just feel like that we keep equating quality. We fall into the trap of we equate quality with this like performance of scarcity, right? Of like, qualifications and versus treating quality as outcomes. And when I say outcomes, I mean like societal impact, access. Like, what if quality was like we educate the most? We put out the most PTs. Here's the impact, right? So we could reframe, I think, what quality even means. And I think we have to. And again, kind of going back to where we started, that is not a PT education problem. That is a higher education
Right.
challenge, right? And problem, like the way we built it. And so I think we have to redefine what quality means. But again, I'll say it again, none of this means we lower the bar, right? None of this means we say, because protecting the public is the most important thing. I mean, absolutely, we must protect the public. The stakes are high. This is not about lowering the bar. Again, it's about setting the bar, or maybe even raising the bar, and then building systems where more people can reach it. So whether that means more access, more supports, more instructors, more, that's how I see it.
Right. Well, I think to your point on the NPTE, I think that is the driver. If I had to pick what is the major driver, it's that, because it is the low-hanging fruit. Everybody gets data from the FSBPT on what their first-time pass rate and their ultimate pass rate is. And many people realize it's just another credential. It doesn't mean you have excellence. The lack of pass rates, delay some of the outcomes for your students. But we have not, other than what Rich Shields has been doing with the, I'm going to forget the name
The
of
benchmarking.
it. Benchmarking, right.
The PTGQ.
Yep.
Yes. In the PTGQ, it took a broader perspective, right? And I think we need to do more of that. To your point, Kendra, I think we have to look at impact also on patients, which we don't do at all. And you could have almost a perfect score on that exam and still not be a great clinician, right? Because there's things that exam can't measure. It can't measure your emotional intelligence, your ability to interact and to motivate people, et cetera. But it's easy, and therefore people do it. But there are many, many examples where we could do more. And I do agree that medicine has some of those examples out there, how they are looking at their long-term outcomes, especially with the availability of AI, but tracking the outcomes of their graduates. And we can do that and do better. The other thing is, I know I'm driving the cost and everything, but as somebody that also came from a socioeconomically underprivileged area, I couldn't pay for test prep. I was happy to be eating and paying my tuition and rent, right? I couldn't pay for test prep. I couldn't pay for the extras. I never had a SAT coach or a GRE coach. You know what I'm saying? We forget that there are people that become, they kind of buy into this idea, oh, I'm a terrible test taker, and that, it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy in that way. But it's unfortunate because it's, again, separating people that can afford all of those things and those that can't, which very much limits the number of underrepresented or historically marginalized individuals and people from low socioeconomic groups.
Yeah, I appreciate that. This is a justice issue, really.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. We've talked a lot about entry-level physical therapy. Kendra, you mentioned at the beginning, part of your work is in post-professional education. And let's talk about the scarcity model there, because I think it's even worse. What are the number of residency slots available for PT graduates compared to the number of PT graduates?
I don't even know. I don't know that number. Do you know?
Well, I think it's in the like 600s or so, right? If I had
Yeah.
to guess,
Yeah.
compared to like what 12 to 14, 15,000. I don't know how many graduates we're up to yet, but
Yeah.
it's like 10%, or
Again,
less. Yeah.
and we're stacking it again, we're stacking it on this already length of time. You're right. We're scarcity of slots, scarcity of opportunity.
Hmm.
We're stacking it already on a degree program and credential that is lengthy and expensive. I suspect that now we have not only a self-selected group of probably sort of elite students because they are interested in specializing, but also probably people with elite resources who can now afford to take another year or more of their time and their money, because we know that most of these programs either cost more tuition, or, you take a salary reduction. I think the latter is the more common. So yeah, I mean, I think it plays out again in that, and again, this very rare specialized credential. So I think we see it mirrored in all the same
Yeah.
ways. And it is through, again, and Mary talked about the PTA to PT. So there's that other kind of bridge. Now, I do know ABPTRFE is working on, I think did a call for like innovative models and sort of more of a DPT to specialty bridge. And there are a couple of programs, I think Delaware, I think somewhere in Florida, University of South Florida, maybe are piloting some new models. So I'm encouraged by that maybe we can start to build some different bridges and pathways there. But again, it's still just part of it's scarcity across the pipeline. Now we're just at this end of the pipeline.
Yeah.
Well, and
As
then add
you
to
as
that,
people check out your paper, you have a nice table that talks about here are some options to solve some of these things, right? So like one of them would be like open courseware for prerequisites.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to plug that too, that as your paper, you're not just like proposing here's this lens, you're also giving some concrete solutions that people can start considering as well.
Yeah. I mean, grow what you can. Increase your seats as you can. If you're building if you're building now, I mean, build for scale. Think about online learning, hybrid models. I mean, AI, we're just scratching the surface of that. Being I think we could be, creative to your point about how we're getting prerequisites and, duplication of effort, whether we're, stacking micro credentials, which I think that's a whole other topic. But again, that I think lends itself nicely to thinking in the post-professional place. Or post-professional space? Is it DPT to full residency, or what if we could stack some courses and things to kind of get you there slowly, right? So we do have, I think, some things in there that are actionable on even a program level. But again, we also have a call to APTA, to CAPD, to ACAP, some of our organizations to come to the table and start advocating for structures and systems for more abundance. And I think I'll use an example of the federal borrowing caps. And I don't know, this may be a hot take, but I'm not a fan of the way these are being rolled out and how this looks, and the fact that our profession isn't included in these 10 and all of that. And I am uncomfortable advocating for our students to be able to take $200,000 of loans out.
Yeah.
So I feel really stuck because what I'm seeing mostly is advocacy for we need to be on the list to have $200,000. This is what we're working on. This is what APTA is working on. And I get it. And there is something really symbolic there for our profession. I want to point that out. And I am really rumbling with like, but do I really feel? And we know, again, going back to Rich Shields' work, the net present value of the PT degree, we know data that over about $150,000 in debt, that the value of our degree, it's kind of not worth it anymore from a financial perspective. We're talking about economic and financial debt and wealth, right? So but still our, and so again, I still like want our professional organizations, like I want that call too, to like, let's get more creative than this. Let's blow up the system. But yeah, I'm struggling with that piece.
And there are other creative models out there. Harrisburg University, they have decided to not charge for their baccalaureate programs but they do charge for their graduate programs, right? Because part of this equation is also the debt people acquire in their undergraduate work. And so, so it really system-wide, we could have those conversations. Programs that have both undergraduate and graduate programs, and they're also using partnerships with private and private PT companies to help sponsor some of that education because they have a vested interest. Because as we all talked about, there is a shortage, and that shortage is likely to get worse in the next 10 years than even predicted in the APTA paper. So what if we could partner with institutions and companies to say, let's dig in this together, but everybody, higher ed has to lower their costs. I'm sorry, but we can't keep charging and say, oh, private practice, please donate all your money to upcoming students. That's not fair. And in fact, I had it somewhere, but like in the 70s, the Pell Grant covered, say, 70 to 80% of an undergraduate program. It now covers maybe 35%.
Oh, wow.
That is incredible. So people are going into their graduate programs already in debt. And I also think these flexible pathways that Kendra referred to before, some people may need to go, pause a minute, make some more money, go some more, pause a minute, and have maybe some collaborative relationships with industry that says, okay, Mary, we'll take you on as this, you're not a PT, but we'll take you on, we'll pay, you'll keep your hands in the profession enough for you to regroup financially and then go on. So the idea of, time variable competency-based education, but just flexibility in the pathway is so powerful, how much it could do for individuals that aren't lucky enough to have family who can write a check for their tuition.
And if there's anybody, and for anybody who's thinking you can't do time variable, right? I would say look at Western Governors University. And again, we're going to go back to nursing, our friends in nursing. Their nursing program, they charge a per term tuition. And I am no expert in this, so I'm just going to give you kind of my high level understanding. But in their, I think it's in their RN to BSN program, they charge about $5,000, a little over $5,000 per 6-month term. The students decide how many courses they want to take in that term. They could take, I think, a lot or a few, but right there, they do have a defined, so they built something in the structure we have. There's a defined academic term. You pay per term. You can stack up a ton of courses, or you can take a few. You keep going, right? You still have to go in order. And then they have these regional centers around the country where you go in to do your skills checks, your checkoffs, your whatever. And so it is effectively, a time variable, very affordable model that people can stop in and out of because you're not in this cohorted. I mean, we haven't talked about that other part of scarcity, that we're all on this, not just the time that it takes the same amount of time, but we're in a cohort. You start now, you finish now. There's no ability to stop in and out. I mean, I think somewhere like Western Governors, again, has a structure that we could learn from and potentially use, in our profession.
I'd like to, kind of urgently say that for the incumbent institutions out here, I think you're at risk, right? Because it's harder for those incumbents to make those dramatic shifts that could result in like really innovative models. Great. There's simple things to do and you should do them. But when somebody makes that Western Governor model inside of PT, I think you could see incumbent universities suddenly suffer a lot because they hadn't shifted.
Yeah. And, just to step on the innovation and not to do, I'm going to put my organization out there, but Rehab Essentials in the In Tandem product, we created something that was intended. We created content that was intended to lower the replication of creating content across 300 programs. The idea is we have the background. The university faculty are the people that do the exciting, engaged activities. But the whole purpose, Steve Tepper's vision in creating it, was to lower the cost of what it takes to run a PT program. But I will tell you, having been in, 30 to 45 pitch meetings about that, it is largely rejected because people feel that they have to be the ones to create the PowerPoints and change the PowerPoints and present the content year after year after year. And I don't know where that comes from. Maybe it's a job security thing, or maybe it's just truly that's what someone's picture is. Well, if I'm a faculty, I must be the one creating the content. But we have several partners who would agree to disagree about that, right? So the innovation is great. And Kendra, I think you're one of the most creative people I know and really come up with some fantastic ideas. People have to buy into it. And what does that take? Does it take the pain point to be so painful that we have no choice? And that's the thing. That's why the conversations have to start, right? Because there are other models out there, but people pretty much reject the concept that things might occur differently.
Yeah, I can relate to that, Mary. I once went with a curriculum to a university, and I wanted to use that curriculum that me and some other colleagues had put together in the classes. And the director of that program said, "Well, no, like people spend so much money at this school, we have to make them feel like they got the special thing from this faculty." Right. And so it was rejected offhand. And boy, what a great example of this scarcity thing. Like we can't use this thing that costs nothing, because we need to make this thing that's really, artisan.
Yeah. I think a useful, like at least what comes up for me, or a useful metaphor is like the housing market or the housing crisis, right? Like we are sort of in a housing crisis in our country because how do we build homes? Piece by piece, brick by brick, on site, right? With a specific crew comes in and builds each piece, right? And we do it and we mimic that over and over again. And so there's some discussion again when you start, about, well, what if we had more kind of modular components to homes? What if we build them and then bring them on site, and it doesn't mean that it's cheaper or worse, or it's still your house and your place, and you still decide what color couch and how you're going to plant the flowers around it and all of those things. But we could create a much more affordable model if we sort of modularize certain pieces and scaled those. And I think that I don't know, that comes up for me, and thinking about like what Rehab Essentials and others are doing is sort of figuring out what are the parts that we could sort of modularize, so you don't have to build that part piece by piece, brick by brick, in this very bespoke way on site, but you still can very much build around it all the things that make your program really special. And I still think it is too bad that people think that the idea is, well, we have to have, like, these students spend so much money, so we have to have these students, or we're so exclusive. Again, it's you can't unsee it. It's scarcity, scarcity, scarcity. But I bet there's a lot of students that maybe would never have had access to PT education at all that might really appreciate a model that allowed for scalability. But we don't know about those students because they never make it to us.
Yeah. So, I think the you can't unsee it thing. I'm gonna kind of wrap us up with this as a thought, right? So, one of I said it rings my bell at the beginning, but really what this paper has the ability to do is to help us rewire how we think, right? And that's why I think it's so important that people read it and people kind of continue this discussion about it. I recently rewatched the film Arrival, right? And one of the premises there is that language wires how you think, right? And so in that, the octopods spoke in like a 360-degree language where they started from both sides, and it made time irrelevant, right? And so it was really hard to learn the language, but once they did, it would like transform humanity. It's kind of I just made a spoiler, but it's old enough that it's okay. You're the octopods in this equation, right? Because the language of scarcity is how we were all wired. It was from prerequisites to the marketing of the program that Carly mentioned, to how we think we're protecting society versus the evidence, the 50% rule. It's the wiring, it's our language. And so to really have these conversations cause change, I think we need to acknowledge that we need to unwire some of these things about how we think. And so again, thank you for this wonderful paper. I could literally continue to talk all day with you all. You're really both delightful to have on the podcast. So, but let's wrap it up here so that way people don't get mad at us if we keep going too long. But we'll love to have you back because I think this is a start of a conversation and there's a lot more to go.
Yeah.
And Eric, could I give a little bit of a shameless plug?
Go for it. Yeah.
Kendra and I were invited to be part of the PTLI, Physical Therapy Learning Institute's Disruptive Innovation Summit this year. And the exciting part about it is that one of the two keynote speakers is Mike Smith, who wrote the Abundance book. And then he and another speaker on the first day, and then we are on the second day, and we're going to be the first presenters following up after that. So I put that out there. If you want to know more, go to ptli.org and learn about it. We would love for people to participate, especially people like yourselves that are really passionate about this.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's a really important thing. And I'm glad that there's parts where this is starting to catalyze. And, I'm going to Graham sessions. I don't know if you all are going to Graham sessions, but I'm going to make sure I bring up this topic there. And, let's, as much as we can have this conversation, let's have it.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Enjoyed the conversation. And this was another episode of PT Outcast, and it was my true pleasure. Thank you.